Good afternoon to everybody. The topic for today is how to write a research proposal. We, in our last two sessions, we discussed fallacies. Before that, we discussed different modes of doing Buddhist research. And today and next couple of days, I will be discussing with you more technical aspects of doing a research. So today my theme is how to write a research proposal. Research proposal is an important aspect in any research. Particularly, research proposal is important when you do graduate studies research, MPhil or PhD. Now, in order to write a research proposal, one must have a research topic or a research theme identified. Now, this first thing, I hope you remember, we discussed at the very beginning. Particularly, I discussed with you how to find what we call new knowledge in the field. So when we were discussing new knowledge, in fact, the whole concept of new knowledge requires for you to have identified a good research topic with the potential of contributing to the existing knowledge. So now, when we look at this, that you have to identify a research theme. This is not something that comes automatically. Usually, this comes with your experience. But somehow, sometimes a student go to teachers and ask, sir, give me a topic. Now, this happens very often, when you are teaching in a college system, people ask for a topic. That's in a way okay when you are doing undergraduate studies. Usually when people are required to write an essay, undergraduate studies we usually give the theme or the topic and then they write. But graduate studies is different. At that level, the theme has to be coming from your own experience. You can still ask from your teacher. But if somebody outside give you a topic, how can you make it your own topic? Because it doesn't come from your academic experience. Now, a person with more experience will know, okay, this particular theme has not been adequately done, or this particular theme has not been done, or this particular theme has done by some people, but that is not good enough. So all these things could be known by experienced person. But the thing is, when an experienced person gives you, okay, you do this, biggest disadvantage is that, it doesn't come from your experience. You really don't know it. But on the other hand, if a research theme comes from your own experience, then of course, you are very much at it. It's not like, somebody else giving you. So don't depend on others, don't depend on your teachers for you to get your research topic. And also, they don't have a collection of research topics. Okay, this for you, this for you, this for you, and this for you. You can't distribute research topics like that. Okay? So a research theme has to come from your experience. Now, this is why usually when it comes to PhD research, a lot of universities, particularly in universities, United States, they ask you to study coursework. So even though you go for a PhD, you are doing 1 or 2 years of coursework. In fact, the meaning of that is when you do coursework, you are just following courses. Your supervisor, your advisor will sit with you and look at your background, and she will say, okay, do this, do this, do this. And then when you do these things, now this is the opportunity for you to read, think, to know about the field, to talk to others, to talk to colleagues, to talk to teachers. And that way, with that experience, you can come up with something. But usually, this process happens like this. You get some hunch, some idea, okay, maybe I can do this. Then you start following that, reading. Okay, you read some of the important things, maybe a couple of articles. You look at some books about that subject. But maybe when you do some work, maybe it might take a couple of months for you. And then you realize that, this has been done very well. I don't seem to have anything new to say. Now, of course, it has taken a couple of months from your life now. But still then, you are giving that up. Okay, you keep that aside. You follow some other hunch, other topic. Maybe again you read for some time, some articles, some books. And then again you find that, okay, but there is not much of prospectus of doing that. You give up that also. But important thing is, in that process, you have read many books. You have read many articles. You know quite a lot about the area. So knowing the situation, status of your area is very important for you to isolate something. Okay, maybe I can do this. And then with that topic, you can go to your supervisor, go to your teacher and ask, what do you think about this? Is it good? Now at that point, of course, your teacher can guide you. Okay? At that point, your teacher can guide you. But if you just go empty-handed, so give me a topic, that's not going to work. But if you take a topic and ask, how is this? You have a conversation. Now, you don't go empty-handed. You go with something on your reading. You can say to your advisor or supervisor, differences in the universities, usually there is a graduate student advisor who is helping the graduate student. That's one position. Supervisor is the one appointed for you particularly. But even if you don't have a supervisor, you can go to some teachers. And then when you go with something, then you can have a conversation about it, possibilities, and maybe that person will ask, okay, why don't you read some more, this and this and this, okay? Now, selecting a topic can take 1 or 2 years, actually. It can take 1 or 2 years. But, during that time, you are just not idling. You are reading, thinking, questioning, talking, a lot of things go on. That's the experience. But, sometimes you can fairly easily, you can come up to a topic, when you read something. But that is why whenever you read academic papers, at this stage, always keep on thinking. Just don't read. Keep on thinking, is this right? Can this be right? Can't it be different? All these sorts of questions you have to ask. Because, in a particular research area, if everything has been done perfectly, then you don't have a chance to do anything. But everything has not been done perfectly. Only thing is, because our knowledge is limited, when we read something, or we think that, it is good. And then we read something totally opposite to it, it is good too. So at some point, we feel everything is good. That is not because everything is good. That is because our experience is limited. But when you grow in your experience, you read maybe 10, 15 papers, then you start feeling, no, this is not right. You feel that. But of course, you have not proved it, but you feel that, no, this is not right. This is not the way to go about it. So when you feel that, the existing research is not right, then you are in a position to write a research proposal. Identify a research topic. So it doesn't come quite easily. It comes with a lot of experience. Now I know personally for my research area was problem of ineffability, of religious experience. It didn't come that easily. Of course, when I made an application to University of Hawaii, I put some topic and wrote a research proposal. But that is a part of my application. I mean, as the part of the application, I wrote some research proposal with my general knowledge. But I knew that I am not going to do that. Okay, because that is a part of, so then they accepted me. Once they accepted me to the program, I spent time, the reading, taking courses. But then when you come to, okay, this you can do, you have got a lot of experience. But the issue is, if you just got your theme from somebody else, you don't have that experience. It's just you are borrowing something from somebody which you don't know. But if you come in a hard way, longer way, by reading books, by reading chapters, by talking to people, friends, then what you select as your topic is your topic. Otherwise, somebody says, okay, you do this, but you can be in trouble. Maybe when you read later, you will feel that, no, this is not the way, the thing I should have done. You go simply by somebody's word. So what I am trying to say you is this. Selecting a research topic is a very important thing, but that doesn't come automatically. It comes with your knowledge. In other words, we can say something like this. We can say that when you are in a position to write a research proposal, 25% of your research reading you have done. About 25% of your readings you have already done. That is how your research topic comes. You know the literature. Okay. In other words, general requirement is whenever you are doing a research in a particular area, like you do Buddhist studies is the main subject. Within Buddhist studies, you have areas like textual studies, like what we discuss all these sessions. Now, you have to know two things. One thing is, what is the status of your general research, like Buddhist studies? And then, what is the status of your particular area? Say, for example, you are doing Buddhist studies, and then you are studying epistemological related thing, theory of knowledge. You have to know who are the people, what are the books that have been written, what are the papers that have been written, who are the authors, what is the latest thing. That is kind of what I would like to call academic gossip. But that is very important. You have to know your field. Then only you get a total view where it has gone wrong, where you can improve, from whom you can borrow. All these things you can know when you know the field. So in general, you have to know generally, if you are doing Buddhist studies, general knowledge in all aspects. But then the specific aspect in the particular area you are doing, like Buddhist studies, textual research. Buddhist studies, epistemological. Buddhist studies, ethics. Buddhist studies, culture, social, anything. But then within Buddhist studies, you have to know your particular area. You must be able to offhand talk about so and so. Have you seen so and so's book? Oh, yes. You must be able to say that. Not only that, you must be able to say what is in the book in brief. And also, what is good or what is bad also about it. What is you agree or what is you disagree about it. This general knowledge you have to have. Otherwise, you are just in the darkness. It's like, it's an important thing. Suppose I was brought to this place and I was just located in this hall here. I don't know where this is located. But if I went all around and know the whole place, and then I was brought here, then I know how this place is connected to the other in the area. I have to have that knowledge. Same thing, the moment I travel someplace, even in Myanmar, I go to some place, I always feel that I should know the map. Because otherwise, somebody takes me in a car and drives on. I don't know where am I going. But I need to know in the country where am I. And from here, okay, this Mandalay, and then where am I going? I don't find good maps here, but that's a different thing. But I need to know. You need to know the location. The same thing about the subject. You don't know the overall thing, and particularly you need to know what you are doing. Who are the people who have done? What are the early papers? What are the later papers? What are the most new things? What are the most new ideas? This is something very, very important in the research. Textual research, okay, you take a text and you try to edit it. But if you don't know several people have edited it already, then what? You wasted your time. Sometimes it happens to people. People work on a text, and then only after 1 or 2 years, they discover that it has already been edited very well. Then what? Are you going to just duplicate that work? So you have to give up that. But then you have wasted 2 years of your academic life. But if you did homework before selecting that text, then you know that nobody has done that. But today, there are a lot of facilities, the electronic facilities. In countries like Burma, I don't know how the facility is. In many countries, all the PhDs are listed. Some developed countries, more developed countries like United States, all the universities list their PhDs. And also you can read some account. So if you want to find something, you can just go into those things and you can see whether what you are going to do has been done by somebody. Maybe you can't do it in the entire world. If somebody has done it in a Burmese language, obviously others don't know. But that's okay. But at least in the world languages, at least in English. And if you do some research in this country, you have to know whether it has been done or not in the Burmese language. You are doing something in here, but Yangon, somebody has already done it. Then what? You have to know that. But of course, that doesn't mean that you can't do the same thing. Suppose you are trying to edit this book. Some other person has edited it. So you read that book, and if you find that that can be improved, then you can write a research proposal to do the same thing again. But then you have to show that why you have to do it again. So it doesn't mean that simply because somebody has done it, you don't have to do that. No, nothing like that. I think I told you when I was studying, teaching you Nagarjuna, Nagarjuna's Mula Madhyamaka Karika has been translated into English at least by 7-8 people. Now, 7-8 people have translated because 7-8 people, each person has something new to say about it, something different to say about it. This is the academic nature. Sometimes we see that, oh, this has been translated before, then you don't have to translate. This has been edited before, you don't have to edit it. But that is not always right. PTS texts were edited initially when? 1880, 1890, they started editing. They studied Pali from countries like Sri Lanka. Do you think those, even though great people, Rhys Davids and all that, do you think they knew Pali completely very well or something? No. Now PTS itself is re-editing those texts. Text initially edited end of 19th century, beginning of 20th century, they are re-editing. Why? Because there can be situations where it has not been done properly. I had one graduate student, in fact a Vietnamese monk who did PhD with me. His topic was I.B. Horner's translation of Vinay Pitaka. His research, thesis was where I.B. Horner went wrong. So he wrote a whole dissertation. He discovered so many places where he thought that I.B. Horner is not correct. Of course, it doesn't take the honor from I.B. Horner. She is a great lady, great Buddhist scholar. But with her certain limitations, and she did that translation now, of course, more than 50, 60 years ago. And there were a lot of things the others could improve. So it could have been edited or translated by such a great person as I.B. Horner. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't have problems. Anybody. So that is why translations are retranslated, editions are re-edited, so that this process goes on. Now, PTS translated long dialogues of the Buddha, middle-length discourses, and so on. But then Bhikkhu Bodhi and Bhikkhu Jnana, of course, I think Jnana Tilok and Bhikkhu Bodhi translated Majjhima Nikaya. All these books have been retranslated and published by Wisdom Publications. Long discourses of the Buddha, middle-length discourses of the Buddha, gradual discourses, connected discourses, all these new translations. But all these things have been translated before by PTS. They have been translated by PTS. But then why Bhikkhu Bodhi had to translate it again? Now Bhikkhu Bodhi's translations are different. So we think that Bhikkhu Bodhi's translations are, in most cases, improvements. But again, Bhikkhu Bodhi's translations can have problems. His translation can have problems. So if you look at carefully. So it doesn't mean that, the job is over with Bhikkhu Bodhi. But, that is how knowledge grows. Initially somebody translated, and then someone else improves it. So improving process can go on and on. Anyway, the point here is this. When you try to write a research proposal, you have to identify a research theme. Identifying a research theme is not an automatic thing, not an easy thing either. You have to be an experienced person in the field. So you are just following a hunch. You feel like, okay, but then, you really, then you're following it up. I mean, you have to have some hunch. Now, when I was studying problem of ineffability, I wanted to prove that, the early Buddhist teachings do not accept ineffability. So that was the hunch I had. But then I could have ended up in other way around, really, saying that early Buddhism accept it or something. But, in my research, so, even though you have not proved it, you have to have some idea what are you going to do and what is your conclusion going to be. It could be different later. Suppose you want to prove something about the Burmese society. You think, okay, this is the case. And then you study doing field research. Finally, you change, you complete your mind. With your field research, you think that no, what you thought is completely wrong. It is something else. But then you can still write your dissertation about something else, but not what you started from. It has changed. So, most important thing is for you to have a research topic identified. That's why I say there is no easy path. One has to read critically, reflect and discuss with teachers and peers. Most importantly, one has to have an idea of the existing research on the theme one is going to select. This knowledge is going to be reflected in the literature survey when one actually writes the research proposal. Now, of course, when we look at the aspects of research proposal, there is something called literature survey. Now, literature survey means really what you have been doing, reading, reflecting. So, therefore, the first point is you have to have identified the research theme, okay? You have to have some fairly good comprehensive knowledge about it. And then we will look at how to write a research proposal. Okay, when you are looking at a research proposal, aspects of research proposal, I give 10. But, it doesn't mean that there are exactly 10 or, it is kind of flexible. But, the way I put it, I have put 10. The first is research topic or theme, short introduction, longer explanation of the research theme and the research area, significance of the proposed research and study, literature survey, research methodology, resources, research questions, the structure of the research, and bibliography. So these are the 10 basic things that I have identified. In this scheme, I have identified 10, but I have not put here anything about the time framework. Sometimes, particularly if you are writing a proposal in order to get funds to do your research, then you have to give a time proposal. Because say university, suppose there is someone who is willing to spend money for you to do here. You can't ask him for money for 10 years. Okay, but you may be asking funds for maybe 3 years. But those 3 years, what are you going to do in the first year? In the first year, how do you do work each month? Second year, what you are going to do? Third year, what you are going to do? And then can you divide that? So all those things are needed, particularly if you are going to be asking for fund. But even without that, you should have some idea, because you can't be taking whole your life to be writing your dissertation. Some people take long time. It depends on. I remember along with me there were some American friends who were studying, say, Chinese. Now, in order to read and understand a particular text in classical Chinese, these people spend 3 to 4 years only to understand the text. And then, so finally they took something like 7, 8, 9 years. So come to university with the grandchildren. I mean, that depends on what you're going to do, because classical Chinese study can take long time. Now the same thing, like if you don't know Pali, you have to study Pali first. Don't know Sanskrit, you have to study Sanskrit text. Now these things take time. Now particularly in a lot of universities, they sit with you and they prepare some kind of chart. Okay, you have to do these languages, you have to do these courses. Now when I went from Sri Lanka to do this study to University of Hawaii, I was doing a comparative study type thing. So they wanted me to know Pali and Sanskrit. But then I had enough things to show that I know Pali and Sanskrit. So they said, okay, then no need. But then I had to do both German language and French language. They said English is not enough. So I had to follow the courses on German language. I had to follow the courses on French language. So in other words, Pali, Sanskrit, French, German. So you are talking about the 4 different languages for your program. Okay? Now, this is why when you do a study, your research in that type of university, your area of knowledge becomes very wide, because you read couple of languages. I mean, personally for me, I don't remember any German now anymore, but I still read French a little bit. I can understand with the help of a dictionary. I can manage it. But that takes you to a wider world. And then Pali and Sanskrit. Suppose I went to do this study without Pali and Sanskrit, then I will have to study those 2 languages too. So, now in your case, you know English, you know Pali. But that is not enough, because we need to know some more languages, some other languages. Anyway, these things take time. So, if you have to prepare a timetable, then of course you have to prepare a timetable. It is good even for you to have a timetable personally, but I did not include it in the research proposal, because basically we need that if you are really asking for fund or something. Otherwise, universities usually have 3-year program. They extend you to the 4th year, and if it is essential, 5th year. Otherwise, so anyway, you have to do within 5 years. So they make a time limit. Even though you don't make a time limit, they make a time limit. So they don't keep you more than 5 years. So, but very often people do within 3 to 4 years, if you are really hard working. So anyhow, that aspect is not there. And then here we have these aspects identified: research topic and the theme. Okay, I talked to you about the research theme, research topic. So basically how to select a research topic. And then number 2 and 3, when you write a research proposal, it has to have a short introduction and longer explanation of the research theme and the research area. Yeah. Like this, short introduction and longer explanation. Again, this depends on how you write. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have a separate section. Again, it's not like that. You can just, beginning, Usually when you are writing a research proposal, first you have to say, basically give an introduction to what you are going to do. Okay? And then maybe you talk a little bit about the area and things like that. And then you have to give a longer explanation of the research theme and research area. Then you have to give a fairly substantial explanation about what are you going to do, what you are really going to study. So that requires fairly comprehensive, again, kind of introduction. You are describing what you are going to do. In fact, the kind of research proposal I am talking here, when you finish writing, you have written about, may have written about at least 3,000 to 4,000 words. Okay? Yeah, whole proposal, not the dissertation. Proposal has to be like around 3,000 to 4,000. Or in some people's case, it can be even more. I'm saying whole thing, not only these two. The whole thing is something like 1.5 type pages, 12 to 15, something like that. Whole thing. But within that whole thing, your short introduction and your long explanation can be like 3-4 pages. What I'm saying is, don't take it as a hard and fast rule. It depends on what you are going to do, the nature of your research. So some research may require more detail at the beginning. Some research may not require that long explanation. But basically, you have to give a sufficient explanation about it. Actually, what is the purpose of research proposal? Why we are going to do? Why the meaning? The meaning is, in fact, you are going to sell your project to some person. So your readers have to be convinced, okay, this is a good thing. In fact, your proposal is not going to be read by 100 people. It will be read by 3, 4, 5 people. But then, you have to convince those people. Suppose I want to come into this university and write a research proposal. 5 of you are sitting looking at my research proposal. You must be convinced that this is good. What he is trying to do is very good. So why don't you get him down and ask him to do it? Now, that is the end result. You are writing a proposal. In a way, you are selling what you want to do. You are selling your research proposal. Then university will accept it. University will accept it. So, in graduate studies in the world today, in a lot of places, particularly in the United States, if they accept you, then they will support you to do it. If they think that you are doing a very good research, they will provide money to you. Facilities will be given. So, but it doesn't happen everywhere. But in some universities, if you have a good proposal, they provide you with funds, other facilities for you to do that. So, writing a research proposal is like selling your project, so that somebody is sponsoring your project. So, we start with the research theme, the topic, and then we go to a short introduction, and then we go for a longer explanation about the thing, research theme and the research area. Now again, you are going to do Buddhist studies, area is Buddhist studies. Particular research theme is, field is Buddhist studies, area can be textual research. Area can be textual research. Now in the area, you have to really describe, for example, suppose you are trying to edit a book. You have to really write about the history of that book. Who printed it, who edited this first, after that, what is wrong with that, and all these things. And if it has not been edited by anybody, you are lucky. Then you have some subtext, nobody has edited it. So you are going to be the first one to edit it. So your job is in a way difficult, but on the other hand, nobody has done it before. So you have fairly, But we are not lucky like that, because, so many things have been already edited. But if you really look for ancient libraries and look at the palm leaf manuscript, who knows? You can find something very interesting thing. In Thailand, they have this project called Fragile Palm Leaf Manuscript Project. If you don't know about it, just you can Google it, Fragile, Fragile, Palm Leaf Manuscript Project. They have discovered, I think, about 20 to 30,000 manuscripts in Thailand. Of course, that doesn't mean that all 20 to 30,000 are all brand, like, no. I mean, the copies of the same book and, things like that. But anyhow, there are so many palm leaf manuscripts in monasteries in Thailand. I'm sure there can be many such palm leaf manuscripts in monasteries in this country also. So, maybe among them, there are some texts that have not been edited. But, you have to really work hard, having dust all over your place and, looking for the books and, it's not something easy. But, there still can be. There are palm leaf manuscript projects all over the world. Now, from our countries, European scholars took a lot of palm leaf manuscripts to those countries. Critical Pali Dictionary was edited up to very recently. All the texts were initially texts from Sri Lanka. And then in the British Museum, British Library, there are so many Sri Lankan texts. And also there are so many Burmese and texts belonging to other countries. I remember 2000 I was in Oxford University. I did some studies in British Museum and Library. In fact, I was interested in the Buddhist law. I found two, of course, they are not they are not palm leaf manuscripts. They are PhDs written by Burmese people, two Burmese scholars in 1950s and 60s on Dhammatat and Rajatat, Dhammaniti and Rajaniti. Now, those books are available in British Library in English, and they are not published even. So you can get a lot of information from those books. And then there are so many olive manuscripts belonging to Sri Lanka in those libraries. But of course, they have been listed. Now the catalogs have been made, so you can know what they are. And then Harvard University, there is a project. In Germany, there are several places. There are, and then you may have heard Ananda Kaushalyayana. In 1930s, 20s and 30s, he went to Nepal. And then he brought so many texts from Nepal to India. And all those texts are, deposited in various places in the world. People are still editing those things. If you know Chinese, there are so many Chinese texts, they are not being edited still. So, there is so much work to do. But to do those things, you will be, you will have to know Chinese. But what I am talking about, the Pali or Prakrit text can be there. So anyhow, if you are when you do longer explanation, you have to really know who edited the book you are going to edit. What are those editions? English, maybe in Sri Lanka, or whatever. So it is useful to being able to read Pali. If you can read of course you can read in Burmese, but if you can read Pali in Sinhala letters, Pali in Thai letters, Pali in Laos, Pali in Cambodian, those things are going to be helpful. So then you can look at the text. Same text can be available in Pali, Sanskrit, in Pali, but of course Khmer letters, Cambodian, Laos letters, Thai, and so on and so forth. So like that, you have to have a longer explanation of the research thing. So you have to know what are the things. And then we will look at the significance of the proposed research and study. Now, what is the significance? Now, significance is you have to say why you are doing this. What is the meaning of doing this? What is the purpose of doing it? So, significance of the research means academic significance of the research. There can be other forms of significance too. If you do a research, there can be many uses of that research. But basically, you have to talk about the academic significance of the research. Now then here we are going to what is called issue of new knowledge. Issue of new knowledge. Now from whatever the research you are going to do, you must be able to add something new to the existing knowledge. Now if you don't have anything to add to the existing knowledge, what is the point of doing that research? So it's very important. It can be very small thing, but still, it can be, you are adding something. In order to know this, you have to really know what you are adding, what is the new thing. Now, I will give you one example. I was just reading last 2 weeks, about Pali language for some research, my own research. Then one important question was, when was the name Pali used to refer to Pali language? We call Pali language. But in the commentaries, Buddha Ghosha never uses the word Pali to refer to the language. To refer to language, Buddha Ghosha always uses Magadhi. The word commentary is used to refer to Pali language is Magadhi, right? Now, but we are using today Pali language. Who started using Pali language? Who called Pali Pali? Before that, in the commentaries, Pali means word of the Buddha. Neva Paliyang, ne Attakatayang Uttang. So Pali refers to the word of the Buddha. But today we are using Pali is the language, right? Who did use it? So Western scholars thought that Pali was, as the language name, was first used by Europeans. So Europeans made a mistake by using Pali to refer to language, and then others, Buddhist countries, followed Europeans. They said that in Thailand, in the 16th, I remember 17th centuries, I think it is 17th century, some person, ambassador from France, wrote to his country saying that he is studying Pali language. And then that is considered to be the oldest example of Pali being used to language. So they thought that it's happened in the colonial period. Colonial period, the way we were under the European powers. So this is a mistake, where that Frenchman thought that Pali refers to the language, whereas Pali really referred to the word of the Buddha. So he wrote back to the France saying that he learned Pali language. So the scholars said that this is the first time used. So therefore it started with the colonial. This started with the Europeans. So the Europeans made a mistake. All the Buddhists all over the world accepted it. We call Pali Pali language because Europeans called it Pali. Now is this true? Okay, we tend to believe that is not true. But this, the lady, Kate Crosby, she is teaching in England. In her PhD research, she proved that the word Pali was not used by Europeans first. It was used much before that, say in the Tikas and the commentaries written in Sri Lanka. Okay, that's a new knowledge. But what did she do? Only main thing is she proved that Pali is not a mistake by Europeans. Name Pali language was used by authors before that. She gives evidence from 12th century, 13th century Tikas in Sri Lanka. So, now this is your contribution. You might think, so what is the big deal? But of course it's a big deal. Because what she did was, something was accepted up to that point, she proved that it is false. Now, if you can do something like that, you are great. You are adding something to the existing knowledge. Now that is the significance, you have to show that, your study is important. The discoveries you are going to make are going to be important. Of course, you have not made still some of those discoveries when you are writing your proposal, but you can say that I might be proving this, something like that. Or actually when this lady started writing a PhD, he may have already got this evidence with her. So she can definitely say that I am going to prove that Pali is not a European mistake. Now you can say that because you already know the proof. So then in your research you develop it and you present it. Okay. So it is very important to show the significance of your research. Now another point, if you cannot really say anything to the significance of your research, then why do you have to do that research? If your research is not significant, so you have to show that you are going to do something new. You are going to add something new. Again, if I am writing, you are reading it, you want to accept it, then you see, this is something very good, very new. If this man can do that, fine. Okay, let us give him a chance. Something like that. Okay? So, because I have to show that I will try to prove this, I will try to improve this, it's going to be useful. You are doing a textual edition, you can show that, look, existing text is wrong in 100 places. I'm going to correct it. Then that's very important. You get the permission, okay, go ahead and do that. Now, because you have shown your research is important. Your research is relevant. Okay? So this is the the significance of the the research you are doing, significance of the study you are going to do. And then the next one is we are talking about the literature survey. Now literature survey is really, the meaning of literature survey is you have to talk about the researches already done on your area. Suppose you are talking about editing Visuddhimagga, okay? You have to know about all the Visuddhimagga editions up to this point. You have to write about each and every edition and show why you have to do it. If any edition is perfect, then there is no need for you to do it. Right? So you have to discuss, okay, so and so edited it in 1913. Okay, we start from that. And then 1925, 1935, somebody else. And like that. But each edition, we have to show that, look, this edition has these problems. And then you come to other things. So literature survey is really to know about who did similar researches in the past. Main purpose of doing that is to show that how your contribution is, what your contribution is going to be. But apart from that, literature survey means, you are surveying the field. You are surveying the field. I remember when I started graduate studies in 1980s, most of you guys were not even born. So 1980s, I remember in some areas like science, the students have to do like library research for about taking 5, 6, 7 months. List everything that has been done on that area, particularly in science. I remember some of the friends who studied science. I mean, they have to record everything that has been published for, say, last 50 years. So, if you are doing 1980, then from 1930, 40, 50, 60, 70, up to like that. If you do it today, last 50 years means from 1952 up to today, something like that. You have to know it. So, they spend so much time going through the library. But, today with our facilities, we don't need to go to library. You just sit in front of your computer. You get all the information. So, today your job is much easier. If the things are online, it's very easy today. It doesn't take that much time. You don't have to physically go to libraries. And in a lot of good universities now, they have what is called inter-library connections. So from your university library, you can get into the entrance to the Harvard University Library from your computer. So, like that. So, very advanced facilities are there today. And then you type a keyword, all information start coming to you. So, the less time taken today. But what you need to do is exactly the same. You have to know who are the authors. So, the literature survey is basically for two things. One thing is you know the area, you know you have done a survey, general knowledge. The other more important thing is out of the two is you are showing how your particular proposed research is going to be different from the existing ones. Because the whole idea is that you don't need to repeat. There's no point of repeating what somebody has done. So you have to so that you are not repeating, your research is going to be different from the existing research. So, that is basically the idea of literature survey. In your research proposal, you have to write several pages. Like you have to identify the main text of, the people who have done, and then you, the state, the basic good and bad in that particular research. So like, you are spending like 4 or 5 pages at least, maybe around 1,000 words or more than that on the literature survey. Okay. So now that's again very important. And then we have research methodology. I need to talk about research methodology a little bit to you. So we already know research methodology. Maybe we take a short break at this and then we will come. Okay. All right, we will come to the next item. The dependent on the nature of one's research, method or methods followed will be different. A good proposal always has a good discussion on method or methods. Now, in fact, in our discussion we had last several weeks, I talked about textual research, sociological, historical, cultural, philosophical, comparative. Now, all these discussions, I emphasize this point, those branches exist because for each mode of doing research, we have to have different types of methods. I also explained to you the sociological research has a very different method from conceptual or philosophical research, right? Because in a conceptual research, we can do, for example, on the sila, morality, we can do a textual study based on the books. But if you're going to do a sociological study from the text, you have to go to the field. You have to talk to the people, observe, and So, the method or methods are different depending on. Now, if you are doing only a conceptual study, then you are basically studying the text. How do you study text? You study in a library. So, in library research or library research will be basically what you are going to do. So, but then when you talk about the library research, reading the text, it involves interpretation of the text. Particularly if you are reading basic text, then of course it involves interpreting the text. So you have to talk about the interpretation of the text. Or if you are just collecting material from the secondary sources, then nothing much of a interpretation is still there. But then you are not reading any primary text. You are just looking at the reports. I mean, you can also do depending on the research. For example, suppose you are studying something on problem like suicide in society. You can look at the medical report, you can look at the prison reports, you can look at the police reports and gather material from these things. But if you want to decide whether committing suicide involves a apatti, then you have to go to Vinaya. Or if you want to study when you commit suicide, what is the kind of mentality you have, chitta, then you have to go to Abhidhamma. Or again the discourses. So depending on what you are going to do, your method or methods can be different. So studying suicide from psychological, doctrinal, social point of view, you have to follow 3 different methods, right? Studying about the suicide in society. As I said, you get the social reports and and maybe you talk to people who tried to commit suicide but could not. You can't interview people who committed suicide, so too bad, but you can interview people who tried to commit suicide and they could not. But then you can also talk about from Abhidharma point of view, psychology, doctrinally. So depending on, if you are going to do all 3 about suicide, then you have to look at, you are talking about different methods. Or if you are going to do a sociological study, historical study, then again we are talking about the collecting data, reading text, interpreting, and things like that. Now, research methodology is a very important. Methodology means talking about the method, discussion, academic discussion on method. So I would like to use rather the word method. So research method, and your discussion on research method is called research methodology. So the research methodology is a part of a important, good research proposal has to talk about the research methodology. Now again, depending on the kind of research, methodology again important. Say for example, you are going to do sociological research. You want to do that, you have to go from here to different parts of Burma. Or from here you have to go to some other Buddhist countries or some other countries. Now that is a part of your methodology. It involves time, it involves money, it involves other practical things. So you have to mention all these things, right? Suppose as a part of your research, you want to go abroad to your field study, then that also has to be included. If you are supporting my research, then you should know that at some point I have to go abroad. So that means it costs money. I have to go, travel, I have to stay there, do research. So, all those are also aspects of involved in the method. How are you going to do this? How are you going to implement it? So, research methodology or method or methods depending. And then sources. Usually we are talking about primary sources and secondary sources. These differ depending on the nature of one's research. For some studies, this classification may not be applicable as a hard and fast rule. What I mean is this. Now basically, you have to understand this concept, what are the primary sources, what are the secondary sources. In one sense, we can't say what are the primary sources, we can't say what are the secondary sources. Anything can be your primary source and secondary source depending on what you are going to do. That's one idea. But on the other hand, depending on the area, for example, suppose your area is Theravada Buddhism, your field is Theravada Buddhism, then what are your primary sources anyway? Tripitaka, Sutta Vinaya Abhidhamma, commentaries, sub-commentaries, all these things are your primary sources. In general, when we talk about the Buddhist studies field, if you are talking about the Mahayana Buddhist studies, then we are not talking about only Tripitaka, we are talking about the Agama. Dirghagama, Madhyamagama and all that. Also, later Mahayana works like Lankavatara, Saddharma Pundarika and so on. If you are going to do Vajrayana Buddhist studies, Kanjur and Tanjur in Tibetan language can be your basic. So, depending on the field, your primary and secondary sources can be. Usually secondary sources are books written on that in the modern period. Primary sources are the basic text, secondary sources are the more modern things that have been written more recently. Other thing is, primary sources and secondary sources can be different, can differ depending on your research area. Suppose, for example, you are going to study Visuddhimagga. Then your primary source is Visuddhimagga. Okay? There, of course, as a whole, in the subject, you have Tripitaka, Sutta Vinaya, Abhidhamma as primary sources. That's true. But if your study is going to be only on Visuddhimagga, although you may touch the Tripitaka, still your primary source is going to be Visuddhimagga. Right? Then what are the texts you are using for that? What are the editions of Visuddhimagga that you are going to use? So your primary source is there. Depending on your research, it is going to be different. Okay? You are going to study Kuddha Sikha, then your primary source is going to be Kuddha Sikha. And then, of course, in order to understand Kuddha Sikha, you can go to the Vinaya Pitaka. Vinaya Pitaka is also becoming primary source there. But you have to see this distinction, okay? Because your research is focused on Kuddha Sikha, your primary source is really the Kuddha Sikha. But all the other things can be helpful to you. Okay? So, depending on. And then you are going to study Buddhist sociology. Then your primary sources are going to be, basic sense, all the Buddhist texts can be primary sources. But then you don't have classical primary sources in a social research. Suppose you want to do suicide as a social thing only, you are not using Buddhist studies very much. You are looking at the social phenomenon. So we don't talk about the primary and secondary sources very much. But in a way we can talk. Your police reports are your primary sources. Hospital reports, criminal reports, things like that. That's where you get the information. So in other words, what I am saying is, primary sources in one sense can be changing depending on the particular subject. In another sense, primary sources can be relative to the area, field. Theravada Buddhism, Tripitaka. Vajrayana, Mahayana, so the primary sources can be different. But then those are primary sources in a broader sense. In the Buddhist studies field, primary sources are for Theravada these, for Mahayana these, for Vajrayana these. That's one sense. But within each area, your primary sources can be again changing, okay? So it has to be looked at very carefully. You can talk about primary sources in a universal sense only when you refer to the larger field. Say Buddhist studies. In the Buddhist studies field, okay, you can say these are primary in different areas. But within Buddhist studies, your primary sources again can be narrowed down to the thing you are going to study. Is that very clear? Because two main senses I am talking. Primary sources as in general sense for Buddhist studies. And then also a specific area or something. And then your primary sources are going to be different for any subject. Okay. Now, suppose karma theory, karma, then we can really talk about the primary sources as discourses in our field for the particular subject. And Sutta Vinaya Abhidhamma can be your primary sources. Okay. And some idea about the sources is very important. What are the sources you are going to use? Now, you have to understand that sometimes, sources, use of sources can be even challenging and problematic. If you haven't used certain sources, somebody can question why did not use this text. Because it is important that you use that text. It is important that you must have seen that text. If not, your research is not complete. I remember something very interesting in the Buddhist studies field in Sri Lanka. Professor K.N. Jayatilaka wrote this very important and big volume on Buddhist theory of knowledge. And he would try to prove that early Buddhist philosophy is a kind of empiricism. And then Professor David J. Kalupana, with whom I studied in University of Hawaii, he was like Professor Jayatilaka's pupil. And in his research, Professor Kalupana found a very important discourse, Sabba Sutta in the Sanyutta Nikaya. Interestingly, K.N. Jayatilaka had not seen that sutta in his study. So Professor Kalupana wrote a short paper on Sabba Sutta and significance of Sabba Sutta to understand Buddhist philosophy. Actually, that paper was published Philosophy East-West, and then finally he got a job in University of Hawaii. One reason was that paper. But then here you see Professor Jayatilaka used the early Buddhist theory of knowledge. He used the discourses as his sources. Somehow or other, he hadn't seen this discourse. It's in the Sanyutta Nikaya, 6 lines or something, very short. But it gives a definition of what is Sabba means everything, totality. So the definition of totality. So which really supportive of Professor K.N. Jayatilaka's view. But Professor K.N. Jayatilaka did not know about it. Or he missed it, or he somehow or other. Now you see, that can be presented as inadequate use of sources. If you really use the sources thoroughly, then you should have caught that sutta. So somebody can be critical of your research if you haven't used the sources accurately. So using sources, knowing your primary sources and knowing your secondary sources can be very important sources. And then we talk about the research question. Should be framed keeping in mind the basic research problem. When one has provided answers to all research questions, one's research must have been completed. Here what is meant is basically when you have what is called research problem. This is what are you going to study? What are you going to solve? It could be even more than one sometime. But basically, you have one research problem, main thing. Like when I refer to my own research, the problem of ineffability, you can frame put it as your research problem. Okay, is Buddhist religious experience ineffable? That's what you are going to discuss. Okay, that is your main research problem. Okay, like in any research, you can have that type of one problem or few problems. That is what you are going to do. Now in a textual research, you will be asking whether this particular textual edition done by so and so is complete. So you want to prove that it's not. You want to provide a better one. So you put this as, even though there is no question, you put it as a question. In English we say problematize. You make a problem. If there is no research problem, you create one. That's what it means, okay? And the textual research, you can put it as any research, you can put it as a problem. So this is your main thing. Okay. So in order to achieve this main thing, you ask some research questions. So your research questions can be RQ. It can be any number of research questions. Actually, this research question is a very mechanical thing, technical thing. You ask research questions in order to solve this problem. In fact, you look at first this, according to it, you prepare your research questions. When you answer all your research questions, you have solved your research problem. So research questions are connected to research problems, okay? So research questions are connected to research problem. Do you see that point? Research problems. So research questions you ask in order to facilitate your study. I mean, again, it is not a must, but it is good to have a set of research questions so that you can answer each question. When you answer each question, your research is done there. Like in every kind of research, you may not have it. For example, when you do a textual research, suppose you are editing a text, but 5 people have edited it before. So what you can do is each edition, you can take as one research question. So when you edit your book, you try to avoid the deficiencies of this particular edition. And next edition, I mean, like all 5 books, you do your edition by avoiding the difficulties, problematic things, deficiencies of each edition. Then of course you have your complete edition with you. So the articulating a research problem and research question is an important thing, but you have to understand it correctly, because this is to put it as a problem and then also to articulate it as questions for your convenience. That's the main thing. And also another thing is, in any research, the kind of questions you ask are important. In any research, the type of questions you ask are very important. If you don't ask the right question, you don't get the right answer. So you have to raise the right questions in any particular thing. Certain things, research is pretty straightforward, you just do that. But even then, for example, suppose you are studying the concept of karma in Buddhism. What are the main questions you can raise about the karma? Now, answering each main question will be one chapter. So suppose you raise 5 important questions about karma. If you answered those 5, you have 5 chapters there. It's like that. So in order to organize your thinking, in order to regulate your thinking, you have to raise some questions. Do you get the point? I mean, maybe you don't need to have the questions, but still you have to have some kind of scheme. Now, if you look at any kind of research, you look at the chapters of the research when it is published or presented. Now you can see each chapter has a certain connection to the main thing. Otherwise, no point of writing a chapter. Now, that particular chapter could be framed as an answer to a question. Suppose you have 5 chapters, it's like answering 5 questions. Okay? So, it's like, there is no how many number of questions you ask. You can ask any number of questions you like. It depends on. And also, there is no how many research problems you are going to solve. But if you can solve at least one good research problem, that is good enough. Okay? So that is, the the research problem. So research problem and the connection of research problem to the research questions. Then we will look at these last two things, structure. The structure is a plan or division of sections and chapters of a research. At the research proposal level, one prepares a structure which has a logical sequence relative to the level of one's knowledge at that stage. But this may be changed once the actual research is done and presented. Now the structure means when you do a research, it's like to have a plan. It's like a plan. When you want to do a building has to have a plan. In the same manner, you have to have a research structure. Now, one thing to remember is when you write a research structure of your research, you have to write a detailed account of each chapter, so to say. You have to say, okay, introductory chapter, I am going to do this and this and this and this. Okay, my first chapter will be this and this and this. My second chapter will be this. My third chapter will be this. If there are 5 chapters, you have to say, my 5 chapters are this. And then you have to say, in conclusion, I am going to conclude by summarizing all I said or something like that. So then you have a beginning, you have to have an end, and then in between you have the chapters. Now that is the structure. One problem is this. Now you are writing your structure when you are writing a research proposal, but you have not done your research yet. You are just at the beginning. How do you write a structure there? It's not very easy. You have not done your research. Okay, my answer will be like, as I said, when you write a research proposal, with your readings and all that, you have almost done 25% of your work. So you have a fairly good idea what you are going to do at this level. So you can fairly confidently, you can write, okay, these are the chapters, this is what I am going to do in each chapter. However, what I am saying next is, at that point one prepares a structure which has a logical sequence relative to the level of one's knowledge at that stage. So you write a logically coherent account of your proposal, the structure. But once you actually do the research, once you come to the level of presenting your research, your chapters can be different. You may want to add more chapters, or you may want to drop some chapters, or you may want to change the sequence of the chapters. You want to make the chapter number 2, chapter number 6, or 6, the 2, or something like that. Now, which means that all those changes can happen. But at the stage of writing your research proposal, you have to have a tentative structure. Tentative structure. Even in building a house, of course, we have a good plan. But when you really build the house, people change it. But in order to get the approval, you have to have a good plan. This is something like that. In order for your readers to be convinced, you have to have a good plan. It has to have a logical sequence. Logical sequence means you see the introduction leads to the chapter 1, chapter 1 leads to chapter 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, 4 to 5, and to conclusion. So from the beginning to the end, you have interesting sequence. Okay? So with such sequence, you write a research, your structure. The structure is, you can simply say, my dissertation has 1 or 2 or 3 sections. Each sections I do this. But then you are not mentioning about your chapters, how many chapters. That's okay. You can include any number of chapters according to your this thing later. But basically, reader has to understand, this is the basic structure. And then finally we come to the bibliography. Must be comprehensive, inclusive of all works one discussed in the literature survey and more. How different bibliography from reference, works cited, and further reading. it is important to follow a reference method. APO, American Philosophical Association, equals Harvard method, or MLA, Modern Language Association, equals Chicago method consistently. Now, in a bibliography, you are including comprehensive list of all works one discussed in the literature survey and more. Bibliography means the book. So bibliography means the collection of books. So all the books that are relevant to your research that you are going to be using has to be in the bibliography. Now there are other things, categories like sometimes we use the word reference, works cited, further reading. Now these are not really the same, they have little bit difference. Now when you say further reading means sometimes you write a chapter, at the end of the chapter you give several or number of articles or books to be read by the person in addition to what you wrote. So further reading is a very limited thing. You just give 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 or 6 or whatever, not a whole lot of things that are important for someone to understand what you have been telling in that chapter. So this is further reading. Now further reading is usually done in the textbooks actually. Or sometime other books also you can mention further reading. But further reading is a very limited thing. Now work cited is more specific. At the end of an article you can use the word work cited. Now there you are listing only the works, only the books you cite in your paper. Right? You cited, that means you quoted or you referred to inside your paper or book, you put work cited. And then reference is also some kind of work cited. But it can go beyond work cited because reference can include, even though you did not use, those things can be important. So those things can also be included in reference. However, bibliography means more comprehensive. Like you are using whatever the texts that are relevant to the subject you are discussing, you are listing all these things. Now sometimes in your bibliography, one certain important text in the subject is not mentioned, that is a weakness in your bibliography. Right? Because bibliography has to be comprehensive. If you don't have certain text included, somebody can ask, how come this is not there? This is one of the leading texts. How come he didn't mention it? So it is considered to be a weakness. And then if you are writing a PhD or MPhil dissertation, your examiner will look at your bibliography. And then they will ask, why not this book? Why not this book? What happened to it? You did not know about it? I mean, it's a very poor show then. Because one of the very important work you have not even mentioned. But you did not mention. So maybe you didn't see it. But if you didn't see it, it's a weakness. So, bibliography is part of this academic work. It has a meaning. You are going to show that, you know about the important works for this subject. The best thing is, whenever you read a good book, you read the bibliography and see what are the things. You can learn quite a lot. Either you can learn how to make a good bibliography or how to not to make a good bibliography. Maybe some bibliographies are bad. But even from a bad bibliography, you can see how not to make a bibliography. Or good bibliography, how to make a bibliography. So, bibliography is a very important thing. It's a part of your academic thing. You show that you are familiar with the basic main text in the field. You can't miss certain things. sometimes, it so happens, you write on something, you don't mention the most important people in the field. How can that be? So, things like that. So, therefore, the bibliography. Now, how to put the bibliography? I talked about a PA system or MLA system. In fact, my next discussion with you, I will be talking to you in APA and MLA. And this is, again, a more technical part, how to put the comma, whether it is italics, so, these kind of things. So, I will be talking not today about these things, but in my next presentation next week, we will look at those aspects. Okay, folks, so what I did up to this point is we started with how to select a research proposal, and then how can one identify a research topic, how you should really do that. And then we listed 10 basic things: research topic, research theme, short introduction, longer explanation of the research, significance, literature survey, research methodology, sources and research questions, structure, bibliography. What I did not include here is time framework, but if you like, you can also include time framework. Time framework can be just after the structure of the research, you can talk about the time framework. Bibliography has to be the last. Bibliography has to be the last. Before that, you can study. And, okay, I think maybe my account description I will wind up, but you can ask any questions if you want to, any further explanations about what I said.